d'avoir une maison. M. Carney a promis qu'il allait renverser les politiques libérales pendant les élections. Il a promis qu'il allait nous donner l'économie qui grandit le plus rapidement au G7. On a l'économie qui tombe le plus rapidement dans le G7. Il a promis un deal avec Donald Trump d'ici avant le 21 juillet. Pas de deal, pas de victoire, pas de job. Il a promis de dépenser moins. Il dépense le double sur notre déficit. Il a promis plus d'investissements, mais son propre budget montre que dans chaque trimestre depuis son arrivée au pouvoir, l'investissement est tombé. C'est ça le bilan de promesses brisées de M. Carney. On lui a demandé d'introduire un budget abordable pour une vie abordable ici au Canada, mais il a fait exactement le contraire. M. Carney a introduit le budget le plus coûteux dans l'histoire du pays. Il met l'avenir de notre pays sur la carte de crédit. Il a doublé le déficit de Justin Trudeau, juste à 78 milliards de dollars, c'est-à-dire le plus grand déficit hors de la COVID dans l'histoire de notre pays, 16 milliards de dollars plus grand que le déficit que M. Carney a promis en avril. En plus, c'est un déficit que Fitch, l'agence financière, a averti, va menacer notre standard de crédit. C'est un déficit que même l'un de ses députés, Nate Smith, averti, va ajouter davantage de dettes qui va forcer ses enfants à payer la facture et que les attentes qu'il a promis ne vont pas être réalisées. C'est le déficit et le budget le plus coûteux. Le déficit et le budget libéral de Mark Carney mettent tout sur le carte de crédit et vous forcent de payer plus pour l'épicerie et du logement, en plus des taxes et impôts plus élevés à l'avenir. Selon l'Association de constructeurs de logements, le budget va briser la promesse de M. Carney de doubler la construction de logements et va coûter 100 000 emplois dans le secteur de construction. Il y a aussi c'est un budget qui augmente la taxe industrielle de carbone qui va s'appliquer à l'équipement et aux engrais pour les fermiers, ce qui va augmenter le coût de nourriture. Ça augmente le coût et les taxes sur l'acier, l'aluminium et la taxe industrielle sur l'acier, l'aluminium, le plastique, le verre va aussi augmenter le coût du logement en même temps que son rabais pour le TPS sur les maisons est trop circonscrit et ne s'applique pas à 95% des gens. Donc, plus de taxes libérales sur le logement en même temps que nos jeunes ne puissent pas acheter une maison. C'est un budget hors de prix, un budget qui va coûter cher aux Canadiens et c'est la raison pour laquelle les conservateurs vont s'y opposer. Nous voulons un budget abordable pour une vie abordable. Nous voulons restaurer la promesse du Canada, permettrait aux Canadiens d'avoir une belle vie abordable, à nos jeunes d'avoir des maisons, des emplois et de l'espoir. Et c'est pour ça que les conservateurs vont continuer de travailler ainsi et nous allons, quand le temps vient, présenter une plateforme abordable qui donnerait aux Canadiens la possibilité d'acheter des maisons, d'avoir du logement, d'avoir de l'épicerie abordable dans un pays abordable. C'est ça notre message. C'est la raison pour laquelle nous, les conservateurs, sommes unanimes pour s'opposer à ce budget de carte de crédit coûteux de Mark Carney et les libéraux et de supporter une vision qui va réduire les coûts. Notre vision va éliminer la taxe industrielle de carbone, éliminer la taxe sur les gains en capital pour ceux et celles qui réinvestissent ici au Canada, éliminer tous les taxes sur la construction de logements, réduire les impôts. Et on va le faire en coupant la bureaucratie, les consultants, l'aide à l'étranger, le BS coopératif et les contributions aux faux réfugiés. C'est comme ça qu'on va réduire le déficit, les impôts, les taxes et l'inflation. On va aussi libérer nos ressources naturelles en permettant les permis rapides pour les pipelines, des mines, des usines de liquéfaction de gaz naturel, des ports et j'en passe. Ce n'est pas avec le BS coopératif ou des grandes dépenses gouvernementales qu'on va le faire, c'est en éliminant les obstacles et les taxes pour permettre au secteur privé de bâtir des projets à leur coût et à leur risque. Ça protégerait les contribuables et ça donne à nous une indépendance et une souveraineté économique face aux menaces les menaces provenant des autres pays et des tarifs. C'est ça une vision de l'espoir pour l'avenir du Canada et c'est ça pour lequel nous travaillons. Thank you very much for being here, everyone. And now in English, first of all, it's great to be home in my hometown of Calgary, where I grew up, delivering the Calgary Sun. I think we have some Sun people here. We have the Dinger. Rick Bell grew up reading the Dinger, and Rick has lost some weight since then. Rick looks great. I delivered his paper. I also got a chance to work at the Calgary Stampede, worked over at TELUS Communications, and my story is I was raised by a couple of school teachers, and you know, my memories of that time, growing up in the 80s and the 90s, is that though we didn't have a ton of money and we went through hard times like everyone did, particularly in the early 80s, we always had enough for meat and potatoes on the dinner table. We had a nice house in the suburbs with our own yard, our own dog. I was even able to, my folks were able to save up enough to get me registered for hockey in my early, late, around 12 or 13 years old, a little late, too late to make the NHL, but so I had to settle for politics. But the great thing was, above and beyond all of the particulars of our material existence, was the promise for the future, the hope. My folks always told me, you want it, you work for it, and you can have it. That's the great thing about Canada. If you work hard, you get a great life. And I think my friends, Jasraj Singh Halan, Delwinder Gill, Pat Kelly, Amanpreet Gill, David McKenzie, all have similar stories from their childhoods in this area. And I know, for example, Jazz grew up here, I think you were, was it Bowness? Or?
It was in the northeast, in Whitehorn.
Whitehorn, and grew up modest means, but was able to get a great education, start his own business, build homes, and have a great career, and now is the pride of his entire community. And I think every one of these MPs can share the same story. That was the deal in Canada, but that deal is broken after 10 years of Liberal inflation. They've doubled housing costs, doubled lineups at food banks, and what do you know? That coincided with them doubling the national debt. When you borrow and print money, you drive up the cost of everything and destroy the working class. Now, for the first time in the history of Canada, our young people cannot afford homes. We have an entire generation of youth who believe they will never be able to afford a place to live. Food bank lineups are up to 2.2 million. CBC was trying to comfort us just yesterday with a news story saying, hey, good news, you can get more affordable food if you go to this special shopping mart where they sell you food that's past the best before date. So now you can buy rotten food and you'll be able to afford it. So that is the CBC's solution to Liberal food price inflation, which gets worse and worse every single day. Now 20% of Canadians are skipping bills because they have to put the money to higher grocery costs. This is the unnecessary result of Liberal policies. And before we go blaming some exterior factor, let's be clear. Food prices in Canada are rising 50% faster than in the United States. We are the only country, according to the food professor, that has had 4 consecutive quarters of food prices rising faster than the Bank of Canada's target. This after Mark Carney promised that he would be judged by the prices at the grocery store. Well, so much for that promise. He's broken every single promise he made. He promised the fastest growing economy in the G7. He's delivered the fastest shrinking economy. He promised that he would negotiate a win and a deal with Trump by July 21st. Still no win, still no deal, still no elbows, still no jobs. He promised to double home building. Home building is expected to drop by 13%. He promised that we would have develop our resources and increase investment. According to his own budget documents, investment has dropped in every one of the quarters since he became Prime Minister 8 months ago. He promised that he would spend less. And of course, that is the biggest broken promise at all. We now see Carney's costly credit card budget. He doubles Trudeau's deficit. You know, it's almost unthinkable. No one thought anyone could spend more money than Justin Trudeau. But Mark Carney said, hold my beer. And he came along with a deficit that is twice the size of the one that Justin Trudeau left behind. A deficit of $78 billion is the biggest in history outside of COVID, $16 billion bigger than Carney promised during the election. It is almost all due to increased spending, not due to tariffs from abroad. In fact, Mr. Carney has brought in $150 billion of new spending, and offset by the promised savings that he says he will achieve over the next 5 years, it's a net increase of $90 billion. Almost all of it is on operating expenditures, not on capital investments. This is with a doubling deficit, the biggest non-COVID deficit in Canadian history. Mark Carney has introduced a credit card budget that will drive up your cost of food, housing, and fuel, and that is why Conservatives unanimously oppose it. Furthermore, the costly Carney credit card budget will also increase taxes on farmers, food, and home building. So you've got an industrial carbon tax, which the budget proposes to raise. Well, that applies. I was just in Stettler yesterday and saw all the steel that goes into farming, on the tractors, the combines, the bins, the barns. All of that will become more expensive because of Carney's carbon tax, which he promises to more than double in this budget. Carney's industrial carbon tax on farmers is a tax on your food. That same carbon tax will apply to steel, aluminum, glass, concrete, cement, and other home building supplies. I have a former home builder here in Jazraj Halan, and he can tell you that when you tax the things that go into homes, you tax homes. The industrial carbon tax of Mark Carney is a tax on homes, a tax on food and homes. Why don't you tell us what that will mean to the cost of a new home, Jazz?
Thanks, Leader. After 10 years of this Liberal government, home ownership is unattainable. You can ask any of the young Canadians, where a majority of them have just given up on home ownership altogether. This country used to be a place where certainly my family, when we moved here, and subsequent years after that, even as a home builder, until the Liberals took over, one income could get you a good living. You would be able to scrap money together and save up for a down payment. But after 10 years of the Liberals, all of that is gone. That Canadian dream of being able to owning a home, raising a family, it's all gone. And it's because the cost of everything has just skyrocketed, and this budget does nothing for home building that's going to improve it. As the Leader said, by introducing this industrial carbon tax from before and promising to raise the price on that, the more input costs into the home building is only going to make things worse. On top of all that, this is the same Liberal government that spent about $90 billion they committed to home building, only to double home costs, housing costs. And now they're creating a fourth bureaucracy. The first three got us to this point. It's unfathomable that they would create a fourth bureaucracy to make home building slow down even worse. In fact, their own housing agency has said that home building starts are going to decrease this year and next year. And that is scary, because that Canadian dream that everyone wants to be able to own a home is going to be unattainable. As a former home builder, we need to get the bureaucracy out of the way. We need to lower the government costs and make sure that builders are able to build, buyers are able to buy. But today, under the Liberals, after 10 years, builders can't build, buyers can't buy, and sellers can't sell. Only a Conservative government under Pierre Poilievre will fire those gatekeepers and make sure home building is attainable, so we can bring back that Canadian dream where Canada is affordable and safe once again.
There you go. Thank you. And if you don't believe Jazz and I, then listen to the Home Building Association itself, Build, BILT, out of Toronto. They quote, I'm quoting them to say, what was once a promise to deliver 500,000 new homes annually has now become a plan that will cost 100,000 jobs. Canadians are now facing the prospect of a worsening crisis that will impact housing supply, employment, economic activity, and ultimately middle-class families. So this budget, which increases home building taxes, risks 100,000 home building jobs, according to the people who actually build homes. I have here a quote from Fitch Budget. Fitch, the credit rating agency, and they say that this deficit, which Mark Carney has doubled, will now threaten our credit rating. Let me just bring in the chair of our shadow cabinet economic affairs subcommittee, small businessman and member of parliament, Pat Kelly.
Well, thank you, Pierre. This budget does nothing to deal with the cost of living crisis that Canadians are enduring right now, because it just piles on more debt that fuels the inflation that is driving up the cost of living. At $78.3 billion, this is nearly double the deficit that less than a year ago was considered to be so high that it precipitated a crisis in the resignation of the last finance minister. So what was an unthinkably high deficit less than a year ago, the new prime minister has nearly doubled. And this is just going to drive up the cost of living, driving up inflation. We had expert testimony at the Finance Committee last week that talked about the break glass emergency of productivity in Canada. And low productivity means higher cost of living. It means that people cannot, their paychecks are not keeping up with the higher cost of living. Canada's productivity is at the bottom of the OECD. Our per capita GDP over the 10-year period of this government has not increased. We are at the bottom of the OECD and the G7 for per capita GDP over this time period. And there's no relief for, there's no solution for the productivity crisis in this budget. There are no meaningful fiscal anchors, because this government breaks every fiscal anchor that it ever assigns to itself. So this budget is not a solution, and Conservatives like Pierre Poilievre have been sounding the alarm bell for years on this.
Thank you, Pat. And again, if you don't believe Pat and I, then you'll believe Fitch, which said Canada's proposed budget, announced in Parliament November 4th, underscores the erosion of the federal government's finances. While Canada's rating is broadly stable, persistent fiscal expansion and a rising debt burden have weakened its credit profile and could increase rating pressure over the medium term. The budget expands the forecast federal deficit to $78.3 billion. General government deficits of 3.3% of GDP, which is higher than the AA median of 2.3 and substantially higher than Canada's pre-pandemic deficits, which averaged 0.4 in the prior decades. And finally, it says that combined with the sizable non-budgetary financing needs, the higher deficit will substantially increase general government debt, which is forecast to be 92% of GDP in 2025, up from 88.6% in 2024, before accelerating to 98.5% by 2027, nearly double the forecast AA median of 49.6%. Now, those are a lot of numbers, but let's cut right down to it. To be a AA rated country, on average, your debt to GDP is 49.6%. Carney's on track to bring ours to nearly 100%. In other words, our debt as a share of GDP will be almost twice the size of the average AA country. That's the kind of fiscal mess that Mark Carney and the Liberals are creating. So much for he's gone from promising to be a brilliant economist to being the most costly, reckless, and risky Prime Minister in Canadian history, and that is why Conservatives will oppose it. But we not only oppose, we propose. Our proposal is to cut bureaucracy, consultants, foreign aid, corporate welfare, handouts to phony refugees, and other wasted money so we can bring down debt, taxes, and inflation. We would get rid of the industrial carbon tax to unlock the industrial engine of our nation and to reduce the price of everything made with steel, aluminum, cement, concrete, glass. That is everything that we buy. We will cap government spending for a dollar-for-dollar law, requiring we find $1 of savings for every new dollar of spending. We'll make this the fastest place on earth to get a building permit, repeal the anti-energy laws, use the powers in C5 to rapidly approve a pipeline to the Pacific so we can get 1 million barrels of oil to Asia every single day. We will get rid of the capital gains tax on anyone who reinvests their money in Canada to bring home the $500 billion of net investment that Mark Carney and the Liberals have sent fleeing to the United States of America. We will cut income tax so hard work pays off. We will get rid of all home building taxes, not only to provide affordable homes to the next generation, but also to bring back the 100,000 trades jobs so carpenters can swing hammers, framers can frame homes, loggers can harvest lumber, and we can build a tariff-proof industry back to life in this country. That is how we restore the promise that I enjoyed as a young Calgary kid, delivering the sun door to door in my adolescence. Is how we're going to give every single kid in this country the opportunity that we had. We're going to have opportunity and freedom for our youth, home ownership for our families, and of course, security for our wonderful seniors. That is our vision, our hopeful future, and now let's get it done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now questions from the floor.
Hi, Matthew Skase, Globe and Mail. You've yet to address last week's floor crossing and departure from caucus. Chris d'Entremont said your leadership is why he crossed the floor. How do you respond to comments that your caucus is not united right now?
Well, first of all, I just quote Mr. d'Entremont, who said, and I quote, "Since I first elected here in 2019, the cost of living has skyrocketed. Even then, families in Nova Scotia, as it is now, as it was called at the time back, but is now Acadie and Annapolis, were struggling. We warned that the Liberals out-of-control spending and massive deficits were irresponsible, but of course they did not listen. Now, after 6 months under the new Prime Minister Mark Carney, who promised fiscal discipline, Canadians are still waiting." He said, Mr. Carney said, I'm quoting Mr. d'Entremont here, Mr. Carney said he would be judged by the cost at the grocery store. Well, Canadians are judging him, and they are not impressed. Since the Liberals came to power, food prices have risen 40%, said Mr. d'Entremont. We have heard it many times here today. It is deliberate, and it is unacceptable. It is inhumane for a G7 country, said Mr. d'Entremont of Liberal policies. He said, we are a rich country, we are a food basket of a country. We can produce all the food for many people in the world, and we can barely feed ourselves for some reason, end quote. That is how Mr. d'Entremont described the outrageous cost of living as the direct result of Mark Carney's Liberals. I'm very saddened for the Nova Scotia families on whom Mr. Carney and Mr. d'Entremont are raising the price of groceries and homes, but that will not change our resolve to continue to fight for an affordable Canada, affordable budgets, and an affordable future. Thank you.
Et en français.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais juste citer, malheureusement, j'ai juste ces commentaires en français, mais M. d'Entremont a souligné qu'après 6 mois de Mark Carney, les libéraux ont brisé leurs promesses de discipline financière. Ils ont augmenté le coût de l'épicerie, que M. Carney, malgré ses promesses d'être jugé par le prix des épiceries, les Canadiens sont en attente pour la nourriture abordable et que le prix de nourriture a augmenté de 40% depuis l'arrivée au pouvoir. Malheureusement, à cause de M. Carney et M. d'Entremont, les familles de Nouvelle-Écosse vont devoir payer plus pour leurs épiceries et pour les maisons. Malgré ces promesses brisées, nous, les conservateurs, allons continuer de travailler pour un pays abordable, un budget abordable et une vie abordable pour tous les Canadiens.
Rick Bell, Postmedia.
Hey, Rick. Do we still call you the Dinger?
Call me whatever you want. Just don't call me for dinner.
Okay.
We've been told in Alberta for weeks, if not months, that on Grey Cup week, that we would get a win in Alberta. And that win would be a pipeline to the West Coast. It would be significant commitment to action on the so-called 9 bad laws, and that would all happen Grey Cup week. That is to say, tomorrow. We are also told somehow there might be some sort of memorandum of understanding between the province of Alberta and Carney. That's just floating out there. I don't know if that's confirmed. What are your thoughts? Because for weeks, months, we've been promised that Grey Cup week, the stamps aren't in, neither is Edmonton, but that Alberta would get a win on both of those files.
Well, tomorrow, it reminds me when you go into the pub, the Liberals are like that pub that has that sign on the wall that says free beer tomorrow. And so you come back the next day and it still says free beer tomorrow. And you keep coming back day after day for the promise of free beer, and the price of beer continues to rise and rise and rise. So they keep telling us that something is going to happen tomorrow. Mark Carney's been Prime Minister for 8 months, promising to move at, quote, unimaginable speeds. And yet there's not a single project that he has launched that was not already in the making or approved before he took office. Mark Carney needs to do only one thing for us to get a pipeline from Alberta to the Pacific. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. There are trillions of dollars of international investment crying out for the chance to build that pipeline without any government support. All they need is the federal government to stop blocking it. Repeal the 9 bad, get out of the way and repeal the 9 bad laws that block energy projects. Get out of the way and remove the ban on shipping oil off the northwest coast of BC, a ban that only applies to Canadians because, of course, American tankers can travel between Alaska and California in those very same waters, so why not allow Canadians to do the same? Get out of the way and get rid of the Liberal industrial carbon tax so that we can actually produce enough oil to fill a future pipeline. Get out of the way, Mark Carney, and do it now. It has been 8 months. We don't need Mark Carney to put on a hard hat and hold another photo op. He's had countless photo ops in the last 8 months, while investment flees and our industrial sector leaves to the United States of America. He's not got shovels in the ground on anything. Now, I suspect there will be some sort of quote-unquote memorandum. You know something? Memorandums don't pay the bills. We need shovels in ground. So Mark Carney should get out of the way and tell us on what date will shovels be in the ground on a new million-barrel-a-day pipeline from Hardisty, Alberta to Prince Rupert or Kitimat, British Columbia. That's all he's got to do. Give us the date, show us where the shovel will hit the ground, and tell us on when it will happen. That is what we need to have. Get out of the way, Mark Carney. Monsieur, apparemment, demain, on va avoir les nouvelles. Avec les libéraux, c'est toujours demain. C'est comme le bar où ils ont une pancarte qui dit demain, il va y avoir de bière gratuite. Mais on arrive le lendemain et ça dit toujours que c'est demain que la bière deviendra gratuite. Et toujours, chaque jour, le prix augmente. Et c'est la même chose avec les ressources naturelles. Depuis son arrivée au pouvoir, il y a 8 mois, avec la promesse qu'il allait bâtir des choses avec une vitesse inimaginable. Il n'y a pas un seul projet en construction aujourd'hui qui n'était pas déjà là avant l'arrivée au pouvoir de M. Carney. M. Carney a besoin de faire une chose, se débarrasser du chemin. Il y a des billions de dollars privés prêts à bâtir des oléoducs, des pipelines, des mines, des ports, et j'en passe. Mais les lois libéraux bloquent ces projets. Il faut enlever les 9 lois anti-développement des libéraux pour libérer le chemin et permettrait aux investisseurs d'investir, aux constructeurs de construire et aux travailleurs de travailler. Donc, enlever les libéraux du chemin et permettrait notre économie d'être le plus riche et abordable au monde. Merci beaucoup.
Hey, Tim Brooks, CTV. You lost two MPs the week of the budget. One cited your leadership as a reason for leaving. I just want to put Carney and the Liberals to the side here, just as you personally.
Of course you do.
Does this say anything about your leadership? Have you maybe reflected on your leadership style moving forward?
No, my plan is to continue to lead and be the only leader in the country that's fighting for an affordable Canada, where our people who work hard can afford a home and food. That is my agenda. And I will just quote Mr. d'Entremont when he speaks about Mark Carney. He says, after 6 months under a new Prime Minister who promised financial discipline, Canadians are still waiting. He said that he would be judged by the cost of groceries at the store. Well, Canadians are judging him, and they are not impressed. He said this only a few months ago. Since the Liberals came to power, food prices are up 40%. We have heard it many times here today. It is deliberate and it is unacceptable. It is inhumane, said Mr. d'Entremont, for a G7 country. So he said that Liberal food price inflation under Mark Carney was inhumane, and I couldn't agree more. And I feel badly for the inhumane conditions, to use his own words, that he is now supporting for his own constituents. But I won't just quote him. I'll quote Nate Erskine Smith, a Liberal MP, who now says that his children should not have to pay for Mark Carney's budget. Let me see here. Now to the bad and more fairly, where expectations were set at a level we failed to meet, including on the question of generational investments. The budget falls short of these specific promises in our platform, and it unfortunately falls well short of the wartime home building effort that many of us thought we'd deliver. It's certainly not a budget that should throw us into an election at an uncertain time, but it does not live up to its promise of generational investments. He goes on to say, this is Mr. Nate Erskine Smith, a Liberal MP, that Mark Carney has broke his promise to spend less, with $90 billion of new spending, only 36% of which is actually capital. The rest is more costs. So when you have a Liberal MP attacking the costly credit card budget that Mr. Carney has put forward, then we see turmoil in the Liberals, and I know that there will be wall-to-wall coverage on CTV of this turmoil, of a Liberal MP criticizing his own budget days before the vote. I know you're camped outside his office right now, waiting to get comment from him. I know you've been chasing Mark Carney down hallways to find out what he has to say. I mean, it's just been the relentless coverage that you will have of this dissent within the Liberal Party. I understand also there's former Liberal Minister Guilbeault is unhappy with the environmental policies, that while he supports raising costs, he doesn't think they raise them enough. We've got Wilkinson is unhappy. So I know that I'm looking forward to seeing the wall-to-wall coverage on CTV of all of the costly turmoil in the Liberal budget. So I will be tuning in tonight to watch your newscast. Thank you.
Hi there, Sydney Fazard with Rebel News. Last year it was reported RCMP published a secret report suggesting Canadians may revolt once we realize how broke we are. This year, under Prime Minister Carney, we're approaching a $100 billion deficit. How close are Canadians to a breaking point?
Well, many are already broken. That's not the only report. The Liberal government, there was a leaked report that came out through Blacklock's. Got very little media coverage, but it said basically liberal policies had us on track so that Canadians will have to forage and hunt for food because they can't afford groceries. Like, this is in Canada. This is the talk that you would expect in an impoverished, overpriced third world economy. But that is the trajectory that the Liberals have us on. And this costly credit card budget of Mark Carney will make that even worse. Canadians can't afford life. They are absolutely desperate. Go into our streets and talk to people. Ask them about their lives. Their lives are falling apart because they cannot afford this costly government. And it is leading to major breakdown. Go onto the street not far from here. There's an encampment where people who've lost hope and have been broken are now addicted to fentanyl and are dying face first on the pavement on our streets. These are the real issues. This is why I'm in politics, to fight to give back the promise of our country, that every single Canadian, whether they're a waitress, a welder, or a businessman, can have a good plate of food every single night, live in a nice house on a safe street. That's why we're in this business.
Thank you. Last question.
Aaron Collins, CBC. So Chris D'Entremont, just turning back to last week, said that your party is being run like a frat house. So I'm just curious what you think he means by that, and if you think
Well,
that
I think that CBC had to be. Are you with CBC, by the way?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, okay, right.
So I'm just curious if you think that that could lead to more MPs leaving your caucus, and what you think he means by that.
Well, first of all, CBC has had to correct the falsehoods that they put into that story. So I encourage you to tell Canadians about the falsehoods you published and explain why you did that. But I would ask if you agree with Mr. D'Entremont, or do you believe he was telling the truth when he said, and I'm going to quote, "Now, after 6 months under a new Prime Minister who promised financial discipline, Canadians are still waiting." He said that he would be judged by the cost at the grocery store. Well, Canadians are judging him, and they are not impressed. Since the Liberals came to power, food prices have risen 40%. We have heard it many times here today. It is deliberate, and it is unacceptable. It is inhumane for a G7 country. Mr. D'Entremont said that Liberal food price inflation is inhumane. Do you believe that he was telling the truth when he said that? Yes. Oh, you can.
When asking the questions.
I did already. I already said that your report from CBC was wrong, and we have corrected the record. We put out a statement. We stand by the statement. But I have a statement here from Mr. D'Entremont. He says, since the Liberals came to power, food prices have risen 40%. We have heard it many times here today. It is deliberate, and it is unacceptable. It is inhumane in a G7 country. Do you agree with Mr. D'Entremont that Mark Carney's food price inflation is inhumane?
So again, I asked you if,
Okay.
if you thought that, if what you thought Mr. D'Entremont meant by your party being run like a frat house,
Well,
whether or not you thought that would lead to more MPs leaving your caucus. That's
No.
a question for you, sir.
No. So I answered your question. And so the answer that I have back to you is that Mr. D'Entremont this is a quote from just a few months ago, where he said that Liberal food price inflation was inhumane. And you know what? He's right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. That concludes today's press conference.